Summer, not.
Getting a late start today, but going to get a few things done. So Sonnet has been helping me with some strawberries. We're cutting the tops off. We're going to turn some of this into cordial. We might use some plums, maybe some dragon fruit as well in the cordial. Cutting the tops off and keeping the tops, and then we're putting the bottoms in a bowl. I'm going to get the tray out of the freezer that has dragon fruit on it, bag that up, and we'll do some of these. But we might, do you want to set some jelly with strawberry pieces in it as well?
Scrumptious.
So we'll cut some of these up into small pieces and we'll set them in some jelly as well. All right, so we got the bag of the dragon fruit pieces sorted, so that's off the tray. So now we can empty the tray to do a tray of strawberries, but the dragon fruit will go back into the freezer to use for whatever we want. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to turn some of these strawberries into jelly, and I'm going to do some with some dragon fruit too, I think. So I've got two different juices here. We've got the cranberry blackcurrant and the pineapple cranberry, and we've now got room in the fridge because we've taken the punnets out of the fridge, so there'll be room to put the containers in. So these are 1.5 litres each. We're going to go for 3 heaped tablespoons approximately of gelatin per 1.5 litres. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bloom the gelatin first in some cold liquid. So I'm just going to put some of each juice in a bowl here to bloom the gelatin in, and then I'm going to heat the juices up separately. Now these are low sugar juices, so I'm going to add a little bit of sweetener to them because I'm going to taste them first. They're going to have fruit in it. It won't be that big a deal, but these cranberry juices are normally pretty tart, and when you're having jelly, sometimes that tartness is a bit too much. So we've got these here. I've got gelatin in a tin somewhere. Let me find it. Now, I didn't realise, but I've actually got not a huge amount of gelatin left. I've got some ordered, and that jar is really sharp too. Cut my hand on it. So what I might actually do is I might do like 1 or 2 in each of these, and then I might split one of the light jellies. Yeah, you can bring me. I'll put the gelatin in a container so I don't cut my hand, was Sonnet's suggestion. And I'm going to order a new, have it in my cart, I just haven't checked out yet, a new,
There's a couple things.
it's around, a new gelatin. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put 1, 2, 1. Yeah, so what I'm going to do is I put 2 in each of here, and then I'm going to grab, do you want to pick a flavour out of the light jellies, and I'll split the light jelly between the 2 of these, and that should be enough because those light jellies are for 1 litre anyway. So this might set up quite firm, but that's not necessarily a bad thing either. Strawberry, yep, so you want to open 1 strawberry one. So yeah, there's 2 sachets in each of these. We'll just open 1 and just put half in each one. And I'm just blooming the gelatin because it's easier to mix through if you bloom it first. So just put half in each one, and then I won't actually add any sweetener. Yeah, and try putting the same amount in the other. Should be about right. These may not be the most, there's a second one in there, so don't throw that box out because there's
Yeah, I'm not going to.
I actually opened it so you can shut it back because it's so properly opened.
So these might not be the most consistently textured jellies, but it'll be fine. So we've just bloomed that gelatin. Now what I need to do is heat these up to do this. I would have heated it up and added sweetener too, but I'm not going to now because it's got half that jelly packet in there, as well as we're adding the fruit. So all I'm going to do is put it in a pot on the stove and just get it up to a simmer. So we're just going to bring that up to a simmer so that we can then add the rest of the gelatin, whisk it through, and it all dissolves. In the meantime, we're going to dice up some of the strawberries. We'll put them in half for this tray. Can you grab the new plastic containers that are behind my desk, please? And we'll get halves on here to freeze because we won't use all of these for the jelly. And then we'll grab the containers from inside. No. The containers are the 1.1 litre Kmart ones, so we'll put 750 mils in each with fruit and that'll be fine. So I'm going to grab a couple of dragon fruit too. So one of these we'll do with dragon fruit, maybe the pineapple cranberry, and then the strawberries and the cranberry blackcurrant, maybe. Either way, it doesn't really matter. We'll pick one for one.
Like that? Or a couple more?
A couple more? I'd probably cut them up a little bit smaller than that personally though. So we're just getting all that gelatin mixed into that hot liquid.
This works, right?
Like that to make sure it's all dissolved. And then we're just going to pour this over the fruit and then heat the next lot. Alright, so strawberries cut up in the bottom there, and we've got a hot pot. I need a tea towel. And I'm just going to pour this over the fruit, which will soften the fruit a little bit as well. Let some of the flavours of the fruit out too. And the kids have got strawberry jelly.
Don't hit me with the hot thing, please, Mother.
So there we go. So then I'm going to do the same with the other bottle of juice and get that warmed up. But we're going to put dragon fruit in the bottom of this one, yeah? Mm-hmm. All right, so we've dissolved the gelatin in the other set of juice. So it's cutting up this nice and small. And we're just going to fill each container, a bit of skin, yep, with some of the dragon fruit. I think this will be really nice because the dragon fruit texture will be interesting in it. Dragon fruit doesn't have a whole lot of flavour on its own, but with the sweet jelly, I think this will be tasty. Sonnet showing off her knife skills.
I mean, I'm not showing them up, but if you're looking.
So again, Sonnet's having fun with textures today, and we're going to stop handling the food. And we're just going to pour the... Glad I'm not the one eating this. Going to pour the jelly over the fruit. And because the jelly is nice and hot, again, texture of the fruit will be affected sort of in a good way, be infused. Sorry. Yeah. There we go. So now I'm going to leave them sit on the bench for probably an hour just to come down in temperature a little bit.
Yeah, from the strawberries.
Oh yes, we have all the tops from the strawberries. We're going to stick them in the freezer.
2.5 tins.
And we have...
Do you just want them in the tins?
Yeah, that's fine. We have a couple of bags full of tops from the last lot of strawberries as well. So we might turn that into cordial for the kids, some strawberry cordial for the kids. Maybe strawberry lime, because we've got all those limes that we got to start juicing. Which is one of the next jobs, is to juice some of the oranges and the limes. I was going to turn some of the orange juice into like orange jelly lollies, gummies, but I've now run out of gelatin. So we'll see how we go with that. But anyway, so that's 4 lots of that jelly made up with the fruit in it, which will be a nice treat. We'll stick that in the fridge. We'll stick that in the fridge in an hour or so. And I probably won't do anything else today, so we will come back tomorrow. Morning, everyone. It is Tuesday. I'm only just getting started, and it is like... what is my watch doing? It is 10:30. One of the first things I need to do is get the Worcestershire sauce started because it takes 3 hours to simmer. Now, I was obviously not thinking straight when I ordered. I wanted 5 litres of malt vinegar. I've got a dirty half of one here, and I bought 2. I was supposed to buy 2 of these, so we're not going to do a full batch. It's just the way it's going to be. So we need 1.5 to 3 kilos of plums to start with. So I'm just going to pit them, though I probably don't even really need to pit them, but they're a nice easy plum to pit, these ones. We've been eating these a lot because, you know, I buy fruit to eat as well as for purposes. So the purpose for these was to make the Worcestershire sauce, but also because they're super tasty. So very juicy, very sweet. And I didn't weigh these, did I? It doesn't have to be exact. This is a Sally Wise recipe, and she says 1.5 to 3 kilos of plums, and it will, and it's up to you realistically. Like you can, I didn't tear my scales. The more fruit you got in there, the more sediment you potentially have as well. But as I said, I bought these purposely to use to make the Worcestershire as well as eat, and we have a lot of fruit at the moment, so I don't want it to go bad either. I did stew some plums last year when they were really abundant, and canned them stewed, but we haven't really enjoyed them in anything. Like I tried making some crumbles and stuff with them, but the texture just is too different once they're stewed, so I won't be doing that kind of thing with bulk plums again. I did freeze some, the kids did eat them frozen. I did put them in some ice cream and smoothies and stuff like that, and that worked. But predominantly they're nice to be eaten fresh rather than anything else. So I don't tend to buy excessive amounts unless I can get them really, really super cheap. But I would make big bulk version of Worcestershire, except that you have to have the malt vinegar as well, which is a cost factor to have that kind of amount. So it's not something that I have on hand. So anyway, I'm going to get myself probably just the 1.5 kilos of plums, because I am only doing a half batch, and you can do 1.5 to 3 kilos sort of thing. So I think I'll just do the 1.5 for the half batch, and then I'll bring you back to add the rest of the ingredients. All right, we got 1.5 kilos of plums. I'm going to put that in the pot, and then I'm going to clean up all this juice, and so that I've got a cleanish space to work with. All right, we'll add the 2.5-ish litres of malt vinegar. So this is a full 2. Though, you know, I suppose I could have used all the other one and kept the nice clean jug, but vinegar doesn't go off. So we'll do a half litre of this as well. Shall we measure it? Probably should. There we go, 2.5 litres of malt. Now, the recipe calls for 125 grams of garlic. Which in these big elephant garlics that I get from Nikki is just these 2 rounds. This is not my best knife, but it was easy reach, and nothing has to be cut particularly small, so. $60 grams of salt. All right, and we need 60 grams of ginger. So it says fresh bruised ginger. This is ginger that we got in bulk and I've cut up and put in the freezer because I use it to make ginger beer. So it's a little bit icy and things like that, but for ginger beer it doesn't matter, and for this it's not going to matter either. So half batch, 60 grams goes in there as well. And then I might ask Sonnet if she'll toss this back in the freezer for me. Now, the recipe calls for 2 cups of treacle. I don't have any treacle. I didn't buy it on purpose, but we do have this molasses, and this molasses is quite mild. I have blackstrap molasses as well, which is quite bitter, but this is, it's not. It's kind of a lot milder, a lot sweeter. It's not going to be quite as sweet as treacle, but it's going to be within, I'm okay with it anyway. So this brand anyway, blackstrap I wouldn't use, but this brand I've got okay. So the recipe calls for 4 cups. We're doing a half, so we're going to go with 2 cups. So can someone grab me a spatula too, please? Yeah. We got 2 cups of the molasses. Then it has brown sugar in it, and brown sugar is, you know, raw sugar or white sugar with molasses, so I don't have any brown sugar, but I'm going to just use raw sugar because we've just used all this molasses anyway.
Is that dark?
Just a little bit of bruising, it's fine.
Mama?
Yes, yes, eating dragon fruit. Alrighty, so we've just got raw sugar, plain raw sugar, which is mostly what I buy. The recipe calls for 500 grams. We are doing half the recipe, so we're going to do 250 grams. Oh, I'm just getting another spoon to scoop it out with. And then we just have our whole spices. So then I just have to find the cloves and the allspice, I think. So 250 sugar, just like that. Pour that in as well. And then now we want 15 grams of whole allspice. I have a sneaking suspicion I ground up the last of my cloves recently for something, and I don't know if I've got any whole ones left. I'm going to have to have a look. But I've got whole allspice, so we want 30 grams of those. Allspice, but now I need to find the cloves, so I'm going to go looking. So I ground up all my cloves the other day to use them for something else, for that nut butter, I think. So I'm just going to use a couple of teaspoons. We're going to be straining this anyway, so it's not that big a deal, but whole ones is just easier. So I'm just going to use a couple of teaspoons worth in there, and that will do. And I think that's everything. It does have a sprinkle of cayenne, a teaspoon for the whole batch, so half a teaspoon for this. So I'm just going to do a sprinkle, and I'm going to put this on the heat, so it needs to simmer for a good 3 hours. Now the Worcestershire sauce is almost done. It's not quite ready. The next sort of things that I really need to do is something with the freebie oranges and apples, because we just do not have enough fridge room for everything to be refrigerated. So we've had some go a bit yuck because we just haven't got to them in the time that it needed to be gotten to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut up a bunch of apples. Now I'm going to make some apple cake, but I'm going to set some of these stewing, and I'll make some apple scrolls once it's stewed and cooled, so probably tomorrow or the next day. Once these are stewed, they're going to stop ripening any further, and they can be stored in the fridge or the freezer if that's what it takes, or in jars. I do regularly can stewed apples, but I've still got quite a few jars of them on the shelf, and that doesn't mean we can't do more, but at the same time, if I can just use some of these up, that would be good too. So we'll just see how we go. All the expensive fresh apples, nearly all of them fit in the fridge. This is just the freebies boxes, so some of them have some significant bruising or some discoloring, things like that. Some are a little bit floury. I'm just going through, and these are being stewed, so it doesn't really matter if there's a little bit of discoloration. I just pull any significant bruising off, because once they're stewed, it's not going to make any difference, the texture. So I don't want to distort the flavour with the bruising, because bruisings can sometimes taste funny, but discoloration is not a big deal. And they actually still feel and sound nice and crisp, so that's good. It's just weather related, storage related, all that sort of thing. The insides sometimes get that sort of brown mottling on it, and it can become unappealing to eat. But as I said, going to be stewed. It's not going to make any difference, and I'm going to put some cinnamon in it too. So I am going to add a little bit of lemon juice in here while this is sitting, just to keep them, again, we're stewing them, it's not a big deal, but at the same time, you know, keeping them more pleasant to look at. So I'm just going to go through, I'm going to fill this bowl, or if I find a pot, I'll fill a pot worth of them and put them on the stove, sort of 20 minutes with, I'll probably put 1/4 cup of sugar, a tiny bit of molasses, a little bit of cinnamon, and I don't know, a pint of water maybe, and that should be enough to just get them to a nice thick stewed apple. And then I'll figure out what I want to do. I was gifted this gorgeous pie dish. I had this on my wish list on Amazon because these are one of those Lehman's ones. I really wish I could access Lehman's here. But anyway, someone sent it to me off my Amazon wish list, so I have to make an apple pie with that. So we might try an almond flour pie crust. Apples aren't particularly low carb, but at the same time, if I make everything else around it low carb, then, you know, I'll have some. Daryl's not a huge pie fan anyway. So this is absolutely stunning. So I may have to make pie just because I got the new pie dish. So yeah, I'm just going to dice up as much apple as I can. Worcestershire sauce I'm going to turn off in a minute and just let it cool a little bit because I don't want to try straining it while it's super hot because I'll just burn myself. And we don't need that. I don't take the peels off my apples either. Yes, it does mean that sometimes there's little bits of texture in your stewed apples, but there is so much goodness in the layer of the skin, like just under the layer of skin, that you end up removing by peeling them. So unless it's something really specific that you really want that smooth texture for, I don't peel them. So yeah, I'm just going to go through. I rinsed all these and I'm just going to go through. See, some of them have this discoloration here, which on some of them might be something, and see, now that's just the skin. It's not soft, it's still firm, it's just the skin, which is why these were seconds. People don't want apples that look slightly different, and this one actually feels really crispy. So we're just going to, what are these are Priest's Granny Smiths, apparently grown in Australia. So anyway, I'm just going to keep on going and I'll bring you back. So I've cut up this whole bowl full. Now I think these are a 4 litre bowl, not real sure, but I've probably got this amount again, plus enough to make the apple crumble cake that I'm looking at making. I probably only need to use the pot that I put the Worcestershire sauce in, but it's got the Worcestershire sauce in, so I'm going to use my even bigger pot, and just have to be careful not to burn it. So I'm going to tip this in, put a little bit of water and lemon juice over it. I don't want to start it too soon because if I start it too early, these will end up really, really mushy before the next lot gets cooked. And we don't want mushy apples. We want just soft with a little bit of a bite to them. That's how I like my apples when they're stewed anyway. So I'm going to pour this into the pot, add a tiny bit of water and lemon juice, and then fill this again. And then I'll have a look at what I've got left. I have been keeping the cores and stuff too. I might look at steam juicing them with all those strawberry tops to make cordial or something out of. I have a lot of oranges to get through too, so I've got a whole bunch of orange juice too. So I'm still just a little bit, I'm not real sure exactly how I'm going. The weather is a lot warmer than I expected it to be, and things are starting to go off and I don't have anywhere to put them. So we're getting there. So I'm just going to keep going. I'll fill another bowl. All right, so I've half filled the pot with diced apple. There's a bit of lemon juice in there. I'm going to add some sweetener, and I'm going to use allulose instead of raw sugar, because I'm hoping to make a few things out of this that are lower in sugar but not excessively so. They are green apples, so I put a cup of allulose in there because they aren't particularly sweet, but at the same time apples are sweet, so they don't need too much. And then I've got some cinnamon. I'm just going to be generous with that. Whatever was left in the bottom there, really don't know how much that was. And I'm going to use some molasses to give that brown sugar-esque taste. I used a bit of lemon juice in here, but I am just going to add sort of like a cup of water in the bottom as well, just so that nothing burns on the bottom as we get it started. And then I'm just going to put it on low and I'm just going to stir it, and once it sort of hits a warm simmer, 20 minutes maybe, and then turn it off. So just enough water to put a thin splash on the bottom, and then I'll get the pan on. And we'll just give it a bit of a mix, and then as it heats up it'll release some juices, and we'll keep mixing it until everything is just sort of uniformly a little bit soft, a little bit stewed. This will cook the air out of the apple as well, the water out of the apple, the air out of the apple, and just make for a better product. Especially if I was going to be canning it, I always stew my apples before I can them, just to get rid of some of that air and water, because otherwise you fill the jar, you top it up with water or syrup or whatever you want to do it, and then you can it. And if you haven't pre-stewed your apples, then you only end up with like a third to a half of a jar of apples and lots of liquid. So that's all I'm going to do. Just let it go for 20 minutes. Now, next thing I might look at is making the apple cake that I was going to make, because I still do have some apples left. I just kind of got over it. So that'll be next on the cards. Alright, so the apple crumble cake is on Cookie Dough. So I've got the Cookie Dough app on my phone where I looked it up, but it's also on my Thermomix on the screen, which comes up here with a walkthrough step by step. So I found it on my phone in the app to figure out what I wanted to do, but it's also there. So we have a 20 centimetre tin. That's what it's done in. We're going to line the tin with baking paper to butter the sides. Well, I'm going to use a little bit of spray oil, but there we go. So we got a 20 centimetre tin all set up, which is what it says the first step is. Also says to turn the oven on, which I don't think I've done yet. Oven on. Okay, now the crumble topping uses blanched almonds ground up with flour and butter and all the rest of it. I don't have any blanched almonds, but I do have almond flour, so I'm just going to use almond flour. I don't imagine using natural almonds would be an issue, but I have never made this recipe before, so we're going to just sort of follow, as I've said, I always try and follow the recipes the first time I make something, and then I play with it. So 75 grams of blanched almonds is what it asks for. So 75 grams of almond flour. And then it wants me to spin it, which I'm going to skip because it's already flour. Then it wants plain flour in there. 75 grams of plain flour. Now, if I wanted to make this keto, I probably could have just doubled the almond flour, but we're not focusing on that with this recipe. This is purely about using up stuff. I still might have some. It's fine. Plain flour. And then they want 70 grams of butter. Now, as I said in the grocery thing, the kids seem to be tolerating some things a lot better. And when you're talking a crumble topping, nothing beats real butter in a crumble topping just because the texture wise. So I'm going to give this a go. It's a really small amount of butter. If there's any other butter in the recipe, like in the cake base and stuff, I won't use real butter. But for the crumble topping, I'm going to use real butter. So 70 grams of butter, chilled and diced. Done. All right. Next, then it wants you to put the lid on. And turbo it 3 times. Scrape it down. Doesn't really need it. We've got crumble crumbs. Okay. So then it wants to add some sugar. I don't know how much you're seeing of all this, but you know, just bringing you along because it's a good recipe to try if it's a good one. So it wants 50 grams of sugar. I'm going to use sweetener because I have it out and because we're trying to just reduce some of our sugar intake where we can within cost factor. And when you're only talking a small amount of sugar, then using sweetener is fine. So 50 grams of sweetener there. And then we're going to so it just had me turbo it again. Then it wants me to put it aside. Alright, so we've got the crumble topping put aside. Now we need the apples. So they want 400 grams of apples peeled, cored and sliced. So I'm going to, what they suggest, so that you don't have to use anything else, is to put a bowl on top of the Thermomix and tear it. And then weigh it in. So all I'm doing is really thinly slicing some apples. I did just manage to catch my finger as well, which is great. So we've got thinly sliced apples, that's what I'm going for. So $3.90, that will do. I don't want to cut part of another apple open, although I suppose I could throw the rest in the stewing tub, but that's cool. So 400 grams of apples. Now it says add to the bowl with the sliced apples 20 grams of lemon juice. So we do that. And just stir them up so that everything is coated so they don't brown, though that little cut that I just made on my finger, that was ouchies. And then it also wants you to add sugar to it, actually, so let's do that. So it says to put 50 grams of demerara sugar in to mix through the apples. Now I don't have any demerara sugar and I'm just using sweetener, but I am going to add a tiny little bit of molasses because demerara, while it isn't a brown sugar, it is a more coloured sugar rather than a white. So I'm going to put a little bit of molasses in there too to give it that little bit of brown sugar-esque type flavour. So I'm going to mix that 50 grams of sweetener with the 20 grams of lemon juice with all those thinly sliced pieces of apple, and we're going to let them sit while we make the cake base. So that just goes and gets put aside for the moment. So next step that tells on here is another lot of sugar. Now this is an awful lot of different sugars in this. I didn't read this recipe in like sugar in every single layer. Now this is why I do use real sugar. Like I'm using allulose because I started using allulose, so I'm going to finish this recipe with it, but that's 200 grams of allulose, and the cost of that in comparison just plain raw sugar. So, you know, as much as this whole low carb lifestyle and everything is a great idea, and even reducing the sugar for the children, I could potentially reduce the sugar in this no matter what, but I haven't made this cake before, so I'm making the cake based on the ratios because I have to test the recipe out, and yeah, anyway, it's challenging. It wants 100 grams of unsalted butter diced, but I'm going to use some ghee for this one. I understand that it's going to have a completely different consistency because it's liquid, but it's a cake base and I'm really not concerned. Though I am deviating from the recipe when I just said I wasn't going to deviate, aren't I? But it's a cake base. It shouldn't make any difference. We'll see. These are store-bought eggs, so I'm not worried about cracking them into a bowl because these were just from Costco the other day. 2 eggs, and then put together and speed for 30 seconds. Now this is going to be very wet compared to if it was done with the butter, and I get that. Where's my spatula gone? Over here. Like super wet because there was no, what did that have in it? Butter and sugar. So see, that was basically just creaming the butter and sugar, which I didn't need to do because I would think this is partly why I am not a guided recipe fan because my kids love it. The guided recipes on here, they absolutely adore it. They pick a recipe, they go through, they just follow all the steps. For me, I second guess everything. But anyway, so we need to add 100 grams of self-raising flour. I don't have any self-raising flour, but I do have plain flour and baking powder. So we're going to put about 90 grams, and then we can do about 10 grams of baking powder for that 100 grams, just like that. Put it back on, and it says for 20 seconds. All right, so now it says just to put the cake mix in the bottom of the tin. So this was just a very basic vanilla cake mix. Though there was no actual vanilla in it, mind you. I would have put a bit of vanilla in it. Maybe I will put a little bit of vanilla in it. We've already deviated, so deviating a little bit more is not going to make much of a difference. So let's mix a little bit of that vanilla through. All right, so then we're going to put that in the tin. This is quite a complicated recipe compared to the kind of things that I make. I like my one bowl recipes, and I do have a apple cinnamon tea cake type recipe where I just throw a couple of apples in the bowl with some other bits and pieces and pour it into a like a 9x13, which I still might end up doing because we still have apples left. But for the moment, we're giving this a go. I thought something slightly fancier would be nice. So there we go. We got cake batter. Now I assume I put the apples on there. Cover, sponge, layer evenly with apple and juices. So we have apple that we're going to spend some time laying out. This feels like a lot of apple for a fairly small tin, mind you. But as I said, we're going with the recipe. If this is a big failure, I like the premise of the recipe, but it could be a big failure. And as per usual, I'm rambling while I'm doing this, and sometimes I keep all this rambling in the actual video, and sometimes I sit there and go, my God, I talk a lot, and a lot of it's completely unnecessary. Depends on how long the video runs, and this one might be a bit too long because it's 3 days of food prep. Because why? Because it's the longest stretch between videos, like because I'm doing them Wednesday, Friday, Sunday. There's, you know, a Monday, Tuesday gap between this lot of videos compared. I know what I'm saying, man. Brain, not braining real well. I have turned those stewed apples off as well. They're a good colour, a little bit soft. I'm just going to let them cool a little bit, and I'll probably just transfer them to containers for the fridge for tonight. And as I said, I might make some like apple cinnamon scrolls, like the cinnamon scrolls but with apple. So I might make some dough up for that tomorrow. I might use some in a pie or something in that pie dish. I don't know yet, but I might end up canning some still. I could even just freeze some. There is room in my freezer at the moment. Just depends on, I've really got to get to those oranges and limes as well before I lose too many of them. So now there's a lot of liquid in the bottom here, and I think I over measured the lemon juice when I did it, so I don't think I'm going to put all of it in there. Just sort of half, because I think I overdid the lemon juice. So then it tells me to sprinkle the crumble over the top and use flaked almonds for decoration. Now I couldn't get any flaked almonds when I did the shop. I did want some for those brookie biscuits that I'm going to make. But I do have slivered almonds. But I don't think this really needs it, to be honest. There's enough of everything else in this cake, and it's filled up the tin quite well, so I think I'm just going to leave it as is. Just like that. And then stick it in the oven, I assume, 45 to 55 minutes at 180. So I'll show it to you when it's done. Alright, it's cool enough to handle, so I'm going to strain the Worcestershire. This is a fairly fine grid. It's not as fine as I'd like, but I really don't want to use fabric either. It just takes too long. But it'll work. So make a mess, mind you. And I'm just going to strain it all out, and then I'll get some jars ready and I'll decant it into the jars as well. Alright, so we're straining it through the colander, and I'm just going to put the solids into a scrap bowl and just keep on going. I am moving it around a little bit with the spatula, but not too much because we don't want to push too much of the sediment through, but a little bit's not going to be too big a deal. So just agitating it enough to get the liquid through, but not push solids. Now I'm still straining this. I'm washing jars, but the timer just went off on the cake, and the cake, oh man, it's made a mess. It has gone all down the sides. It has gone all over the bottom of the oven. Excuse the dogs. The boys are playing with a remote control thing out on the other side of the fence, and the dogs are not happy about it. It is just, look. So I don't know why. As I've said, I generally try and make the recipe the first time, and I did predominantly. The only thing I did significantly different was use the sweetener and use the ghee. I don't know. So this is what we've ended up with, and a mess, a big mess. So call that a fail. I have no idea if this is cooked, none whatsoever. Or if there's even any cake left in it. Like, seriously, what has that done? I don't know. So I'll let it cool and then we'll cut it open and see if the kids they've got that jelly. And because the jelly I made, we'd run out of gelatin, I used the jelly. It probably needed a bit more jelly in it. And anyway, it's set, but it's very, very wobbly. So if this is a train smash and the jelly's a little bit wobbly, then it's like a mini trifle. So anyway, I'll show it to you when it cools a little bit, and I'll take the tin off and see what it does. So I've got my jars. Let me back you up a little bit. These are my passata jars. I just remembered when I went to use them that I haven't ordered new lids. I've only got reused lids, but that's fine for this because we're not actually going to process it. We just put it in hot, put the lids on, because it's mostly vinegar. There's nothing really in it that can go bad. I can store it in the bottom of the fridge if I'm overly concerned, but I'm not. I generally just do it on the shelf. Now, I'm not sure how much I'll get out of this. It's always a little bit different each batch because it depends on the water quantity of the fruit. It depends on how long you simmer it for, all those sorts of things. So each of these jars are, I want to say 680 grams, these passata jars. After about 24 hours, all the sediment will settle to the bottom anyway. And all I do is, if I don't want that sediment, like if I'm having it on just a little bit drizzled on a piece of steak or something, I don't shake the bottle. But if I'm using it in like bolognese or anything, that bit of sediment's not an issue. So I just shake it before doing it. So, all right, so it looks like we're gonna have a little bit more than 3 jars full, of course. I only cleaned 3 jars, so I'll just have to find something else to put the rest in. You have the old Worcestershire sauce bottle. Inside's clean, the outside's dusty, and it's tacky because the stickers come off it, but it hasn't been cleaned because that's just, I don't do that. I get asked in the canning group that I help run on Facebook how everyone gets the labels off the jars. I don't. They come off after a couple of canning jobs. Bet you this is going to be just a little bit more than this jar too. Am I eating anything that I can have some with tonight? We might just make it work. There we go, look at that. So it's approximately 2.1, 2.3 litres, I suppose. And we started with 2.5 litres of vinegar, but we would have, and then we added more things to it, but then we would have got some reduction in liquid in the simmering process. And anyway, this is what we ended up with. So I definitely could do bigger batches because this won't last me all that long. Some people don't use much in the way of Worcestershire sauce. I use it in everything. I love the flavour. I like it just like this one too is handy. It's got the little dripper lid. So like if I was having steak, I could just drip some over the top of it and eat it like that. And the depth of flavour of this homemade stuff is amazing. It's so good. So Worcestershire sauce, done. You can process it if you want to. Just water bath 10 minutes like a jam. 15 minutes for our altitude theoretically, but 10 or 15 minute water bath, steam can, just to get the lids to seal, but it doesn't really need it because it's pretty shelf stable on its own. But there you go. So it's cooled a little bit, so I wanted to see what it looked like underneath, and the cake literally hasn't cooked. Like, let me see if I can get you, like it is literally just liquid on the bottom. I am going to put it back in the oven for a bit, low temperatures, see how I go. Now, the only thing I can think of is that I was perhaps a little overzealous on the baking powder and then a little overzealous on the lemon juice with the apples, and then we've had a reaction which has caused this sort of, you know, bubbling vinegar, acid and baking powder thing. But I did 10 grams of baking powder to 100 grams of plain flour. That's not a lot, and I halved, like I think I put 40 grams in with the apples, but I only poured 20 grams in here, which is what it said on the recipe. So I don't know, but it is basically still just liquid in the bottom. So I'm going to put it back in the oven and see, because yeah, it's just liquid, and see if I can get it edible in some way. All right, I changed my mind. So I started putting the apple in containers, and I filled 4 of these containers and went, there's just too much apple to be storing in fridges or freezers or whatever else. And what I use tomorrow won't be very much. And it's really not that much of a hassle to run the steam canner. So instead, while it's warm now, rather than having to warm it back up again, if I decided to do it tomorrow or whatever else, I'm just going to run a small load in the canner, because one of these should fit around about a pint jar. Now I need to get my packing stick, and because these 4 are full, but there's still some in the pot. So we're, yeah, let me grab the packing stick. Alright, so we're just going to fill these jars fairly nice and firm. There's a little bit of liquid left in the bottom of the pot that I'll split between them as well, but I'm not going to add any extra liquid because they'll make their own. And just get 4 or 5 jars, and then what's left I'll put in the fridge. Keep getting sidetracked. So I've got 4 jars full. I've got 2 jars with 2 containers full as well that I'll put in the fridge. I'll make the scrolls with one of those tomorrow. I've got some paper towel, and I'm just cleaning the top with a little bit of vinegar, and then I'm going to lay the lids on. Now, the liquid's probably halfway up the jars, but the apples will settle and it will create more liquid. I pushed them in pretty firm because they will collapse, but I'm not going to keep them on the shelf long term. So even if this ends up with a little bit too much headspace and some of the apples protruding out the top, all that it means is that the apples will oxidize at the top and they'll get a little bit dark colored. They're still perfectly edible. They just don't look as nice. So I'm okay with that for these, because as I said, they're not going to be a long-term storage thing. It's just easier than trying to use up 4 more containers in the fridge and find space in the fridge. Darryl's driving, leaving to get water, which is why the dogs are barking. They bark at the car. All right, so I'm going to put these in the steam canner. It is 25 minutes, I think. I'll double check, but I think it's 25 minutes for above 1,000 feet for either pints or quarts of apples. I think it's the same for both. And these are just apples, cinnamon, bit of sweetener, and some lemon juice. So let me get the steam canner set up. The steam canner on is just lukewarm water because the apples by now are just lukewarm. So I'm just going to stick all 4 in here. The rings are on finger tight, not too firm, and then just going to put those 4 jars in. Steam canning's nice and quick. Put the lid on. What we need to do is get it into the dark green for my altitude. There's different colors on the top, dark green for me. So we're just going to let it go. I'd say something's been bent. Maybe the base is bent slightly. Let's see. We'll hope that it can still get a good enough seal to hit that dark green for me. So the cake looked like it cooked through now, but all those extra bits of sweetener have sort of almost burnt. So whether it's edible, we shall see. I don't know. We'll just keep calling that one a fail. All right, so the jars have been going for 30 minutes. Quart size in our altitude, all done. So these can go on the shelf, and the other 2 containers can be used in the next few days.
Are they cinnamon apples?
Cinnamon apples, yeah. So these 4 can go on the shelf for whatever purposes, and you can see that they've got liquid all the way through now. They will settle a little bit as they cool, and you might have some fruit above. I don't know. We'll see how they go. But they're done. So we got those done. We got the Worcestershire sauce done. I don't know. The cake that failed. And the kid, I'm cooking up some pork stir fry udon noodles for the kids for dinner. And that's it for this lot of days of food prep. So I will see you guys on the next one.